नमस्कार दोस्तों, स्वागत है आप सभी का मेरे इस न्यू वीडियो में और आपके अपने यूट्यूब चैनल मजेदार रीडिंग में। आज हम लोग करने आ रहे हैं चैप्टर नंबर 5 पॉलिटिकल साइंस चैप्टर नंबर 5 पॉलिटिकल साइंस क्लास 7th की एनसीईआरटी की रीडिंग, जिसका नाम है वुमेन चेंज द वर्ल्ड। तो देखते हैं दोस्तों, मैं आपको एक बात बता दूं कि मैं आपके लिए इस चैप्टर के नोट्स नहीं लिखवाता और ना ही इस चैप्टर को आपको समझाता हूँ। मैं केवल आपके लिए रीडिंग करके देता हूँ ताकि आप अपनी अंडरस्टैंडिंग जो है वो डेवलप कर सकें चैप्टर के प्रति। और ये तभी आएगा जब आप 5-6 बार रीडिंग कर चुके होंगे। मैं जानता हूँ आपके पास टाइम नहीं है, मैं आपको कुछ नहीं कह रहा, आपको बस आपका काम आसानी किए दे रहा हूँ और आपको बस कुछ नहीं करना है, बस मेरे वीडियोज़ सुनते जाना है दोस्तों। पहली बार 1 के स्पीड पे, दूसरी बार 1.25 के स्पीड पे, तीसरी बार 1.5 के स्पीड पे, चौथी बार 1.75, पाँचवीं बार इंटू 2 के स्पीड पे। आप ऐसे देख लिए दोस्तों, आपके दिमाग में छप ना जाए तो मुझे बताइएगा। चलिए दोस्तों, तो बिना किसी विलंब के शुरू करते हैं। इन द प्रीवियस चैप्टर वी सॉ हाउ वुमेन्स वर्क इन द होम इज नॉट recognized एज वर्क। वी ऑल्सो रीड हाउ doing household work and taking care of family members is a full-time job and there are no specific hours at which it begins or ends. In this chapter we will look at work outside the home and understand how some occupations are seen to be more suitable for men than for women. We will also learn about how women struggle for equality. Getting an education was and still is one way in which new opportunities were created for women. This chapter will also briefly trace the different types of efforts made by the women's movement to challenge discrimination in more recent years. चलिए दोस्तों, तो ये तो आपको काम मतलब कुछ पिक्चर बनाने वाला गया है। ये क्या है? सी व्हाट इमेजेस योर क्लास ड्रू है। ये सब तो दोस्तों कुछ नहीं है, आगे देखते हैं। अच्छा, यहाँ देखते हैं। 83.6% of women working in India are engaged in agricultural work. Their work includes planting, weeding, harvesting, and threshing. Yet, when we think of a farmer, we only think of a man. Source क्या है? NSS 61st round 2004-2005 का ये रिकॉर्ड है। Rosie ma'am's class has 30 children. She did the same exercise in her class and here is the result. तो रोजी मैम की क्लास में ऐसे बनाया गया। टीचर के नाम पे मेल 5 बनाया, फीमेल 25, फार्मर के नाम पे मेल 30, फीमेल 0, फैक्ट्री वर्कर के नाम पे मेल 5, फीमेल 0, मेल 25, फीमेल 5, ऐसे करके बनाया गया दोस्तों। ठीक है, तो इससे क्या पता चल रहा है? देखो, future opportunities and rigid expectation. A lot of children in Rosie ma'am's class drew women as nurses and men as army officers. The reason they did this is because they feel that outside the home too, women are good at only certain jobs. For example, many people believe that women make better nurses because they are more patient and gentle. This is linked to women's roles with the family. Similarly, it is believed that science requires a technical mind and girls and women are not capable of dealing with technical things. Because so many people believe in these stereotypes, many girls do not get the same support that boys do to study and train to become doctors and engineers. In most families, once girls finish the school, they are encouraged by their families to see marriage as their main aim in life. Breaking stereotypes. Engine drivers are men. But 27-year-old Lakshmi Lakra from a poor tribal family in Jharkhand has begun to change things. She is the first woman engine driver for Northern Railways. Lakshmi's parents are not literate, but they struggled and overcame many hardships to make sure that their children got an education. Lakshmi studied in a government school. Even in school, Lakshmi helped with the housework and did odd jobs. She studied hard and did well and then went on to get a diploma in electronics. She then took the railway board exam and passed it on her first attempt. Lakshmi says, I love challenges and the moment somebody says it is not for girls, I make sure I go ahead and do it. Lakshmi has to do this several times in her life. When she wanted to take electronics, when she rode motorcycles at the polytechnic, and when she decided to become an engine driver. Her philosophy is simple. As long as I am having fun without harming anyone. As long as I am doing well and helping my parents, why should I not lead a lifestyle of my choice? Adapted from Driving Her Train by Neeta Lal, Women's Feature Service. ये देखिए दोस्तों, लक्ष्मी लकड़ा जो थी वो इंजन ड्राइवर बनी इस तरीके से. It is important to understand that we live in a society in which all children face pressures from the world around them. Sometimes these come in the form of demands from adults. At other times, they can just be because of unfair teasing by our own friends. Boys are pressurized to think about getting a job that will pay a good salary. They are also teased and bullied if they do not behave like other boys. You may remember that in your class 6 book, you read about how boys at an early age are engaged not to cry in front of others. Read the story below and answer the questions. If you were Xavier, what subject would you choose and why? In your experience, what are some of the other pressures that boys experience? तो ये सब आप लोग देख सकते हैं. तो यहाँ पे जेवियर की कहानी दे रखी है. Xavier was happy with the results of his class 10 board exams. Though his marks in science and maths were not high, he had done well in his favorite subjects, history and languages. When his parents saw his report card, however, they did not look pleased at all. My goodness, Xavier, you have managed only 65% in maths. Your marks in physics are low too. I know, Mama, but it's okay because I don't want to take maths or science. I want to study history. Why do you want to take history? Think about your future. You will have to get a job. History will not help. It has no scope. But I don't like maths or science. Be sensible, son. Take maths and you can study computers side by side. The job market for computers is very good. तो यहाँ पे ऐसा दिखा रखा है दोस्तों जेवियर की कहानी. Learn for change. Going to school is an extremely important part of your life. As more and more children enter school every year, we begin to think that it is normal for all children to go to school. Today, it is difficult for us to imagine that school and learning could be seen as out of bounds or not appropriate for some children, but in the past, the skill of reading and writing was known to only a few. Most children learned the work their families or elders did. For girls, the situation was worse. In communities that taught sons to read and write, daughters were not allowed to learn the alphabet. Even in families where skills like pottery, weaving, and craft were taught, the contribution of daughters and women was only seen as supportive. For example, in the pottery trade, women collected the mud and prepared the earth for the pots. But since they did not operate the wheel, they were not seen as potters. In the 19th century, many new ideas about education and learning emerged. School became more and more common, and communities that had never learned learning and that had never learned reading and writing started sending their children to school. But there was a lot of opposition to educating girls even then. Yet many women and men made efforts to open schools for girls. Women struggled to learn to read and write. यहाँ देखते हैं क्या दिखा रखा है. रामाबाई 1858 to 1922 shown above with her daughter championed the cause of women's education. She never went to school but learned to read and write from her parents. She was given the title Pandita because she could read and write Sanskrit, a remarkable achievement as women then were not allowed such knowledge. She went on to set up a mission in Kheda Gaon near Pune in 1898, where widows and poor women were encouraged not only to become literate but to be independent. They were taught a variety of skills from carpentry to running a printing press, skills that are not usually taught to girls even today. The printing press can be seen in the picture on the top left corner. Ramabai's mission is still alive today. ये देखिए दोस्तों, इधर ये प्रिंटिंग प्रेस. Let us read about the experience of Ras Sundari Devi 1800 to 1890 who was born in West Bengal some 200 years ago. At the age of 660, she wrote her autobiography in Bangla. Her book titled Amar Jeevan is the first known autobiography written by an Indian woman. Raj Sundari Devi was a housewife from a rich landlord's family. At that time, it was believed that if a woman learned to read and write, she would bring bad luck to her husband and become a widow. Despite this, she taught herself how to read and write in secret well after her marriage. Learning to read and write led some women to question the situation of women in society. They wrote stories, letters, and autobiographies describing their own experiences of inequality. In their writings, they also imagined new ways of thinking and living for both men and women. I would start working at dawn and I would still be at it until well beyond midnight. I had no rest in between. I was only 14 years old at the time. I came to nurture a great longing. I would learn to read and I would read a religious script. I was unlucky in those days. I was unlucky. In those days, women were not educated. यहाँ देखते हैं दोस्तों, रुकिया शेखावत हुसैन एंड हर ड्रीम्स अबाउट लेडी लैंड. Rokia Shekhawat Hussain was born into a rich family who owned a lot of land. Though she knew how to read and write Urdu, she was stopped from learning Bangla and English. In those days, English was seen as a language that would expose girls to new ideas which people thought were not correct for them. Therefore, it was mostly boys who were taught English. Rokia learned to read and write Bangla and English with the support of her elder brother and an elder sister. She went on to become a writer. She wrote a remarkably story titled Sultana's Dream in 1905 to practice her English skills when she was merely 25 years old. The story imagined a woman called Sultana who released a place called who reaches a place Sultana who reaches a place called Ladyland. Ladyland is a place where women had the freedom to study, work, and create inventions like controlling rain from the clouds and flying air cars. In this Ladyland, the men had been sent into seclusion. Their aggressive guns and other weapons of war defeated by the brain power of women. As Sultana travels in Ladyland with sister Sarah, she awakes to realize that she was only dreaming. As you can see, Rokia Shekhawat Hussain was dreaming of women flying planes and cars even before girls were being allowed to go to school. This was the way in which education and learning had changed Rukiya's इसका शायद से रुकैया होगा नाम Rukiya's own life. Rokia did not stop at getting education just for herself. Her education gave her the power not only to dream and write but also to do more, to help other girls go to school and to build their own dreams. In 1910, she started a school for girls in Kolkata, and to this day, the school is still functioning. यहाँ पे एडुकेटेड तो हो गया था ना हाँ. Later, I began to resent my own thoughts. What is wrong with me? Women do not read. How will I do it? Then I had a dream. I was reading the manuscript of Chaitanya Bhagavat, the life of a saint. Later in the day, as I sat cooking in the kitchen, I heard my husband say to my eldest son, Bipin, I have left my Chaitanya Bhagavat here. When I ask for it, bring it in. He left the book there and went away. When the book had been taken inside, I secretly took out a page and hid it carefully. It was a job hiding it, for nobody must find it in my hands. My eldest son was practicing his alphabets at that time. I hid one of them as well. At times, I went over that, trying to match letters from that page with the letters that I remembered. I also tried to match the words with those that I would hear in the course of my days. With tremendous care and effort, and over a long period of time, I learned how to read. After reading the alphabet, Rasundari Devi was able to read the Chaitanya Bhagat. Through her own writing, she also gave the world an opportunity to read about women's lives in those days. Rasundari Devi wrote about her everyday life experiences in detail. There were days when she did not have a moment's rest, no time even to sit down and eat. Unlike Rajsundari Devi and Rukaiya Hussain, who were not allowed to learn to read and write, large number of girls attend school in India today. Despite this, there continue to be many girls who leave school for reasons of poverty, inadequate schooling facilities, and discrimination. Providing equal schooling facilities to children from all communities and class backgrounds, and particularly girls, continues to be a challenge in India. Schooling and education today. Today, both boys and girls attend school in large numbers, yet, as we see, there still remain differences between the education of boys and girls. India has a census every 10 years which counts the population of the country. It also gathers detailed information about the people living in India, their age, schooling, what work they do, and so on. We use this information to measure many things like the number of literate people and the ratio of men and women. According to the 1961 census, 40% of all boys and men 7 years old and above were literate. That is, they could at least read and at least write their names, compared to just 15% of all girls and women. In the most recent census of 2001, these figures have grown to 76% for boys and men and 54% for girls and women. This means that the proportion of both men and women who are now able to read have at least some amount of schooling has in, have this means that the proportion of both men and women who are now able to read and have at least some amount of schooling has increased. But as you see, but as you can also see, the percentage of male group is still higher than the female group. The gap has not gone away. Here is a table that shows the percentage of girls and boys who leave schools from different social groups. So SC, so scheduled castes, is the official term for Dalit, and scheduled tribes is the official term for Adivasi. ये देखिए, तो यहाँ पे ये कुछ नंबर्स दे रखे हैं, आप लोग इसको देखें जरूर से. What percentage of children have schools at the elementary level? At which level of the education do you see the highest percentage of children leaving? Do you think that the percentage of Adivasi girls and boys leaving school is higher than that of any other group? तो ये सब आप लोग देख सकते हैं दोस्तों, यहाँ पे दिया गया है. ये नंबर से देख के आप लोग यहाँ पे आंसर दे सकते हैं. ओके, you have probably noticed in the above table that SC and ST girls leave school at a rate that is higher than the category all girls. This means that girls who are from Dalit and Adivasi backgrounds are less likely to remain in school. The 2001 census also found that Muslim girls are less likely than Dalit and Adivasi girls to complete primary school. While a Muslim girl is likely to stay in school for around 3 years, girls from other communities spend around 4 years in school. There are several reasons why children from Dalit, Adivasi and Muslim communities leave school. In many parts of the country, especially in rural and poor areas, there may not even be proper schools nor teachers who teach on a regular basis. If a school is not close to the people's homes and there is no transport like buses or vans, parents may not be willing to send their girls to school. Many families are too poor and unable to bear the cost of educating all their children. Boys may get preference in this situation. Many children also leave school because they are discriminated against their teacher and classmates, just like Om Prakash Valmiki was. यहाँ पे दिखा रखा है दोस्तों बॉयज एंड गर्ल्स का ये परसेंटेज दिखा रखा है. फ्रॉम द गिवन टेबल कन्वर्ट द फिगर्स of primary class children who leave school into a bar diagram. The first 2% have already been converted for you in the bar diagram on the left. तो ये सब आप लोगों को दे रखा है दोस्तों, एक्टिविटी है, करिए अपने खुद से. Women's movement. Women and girls now have the right to study and go to school. There are other spheres like legal reform, violence and health where the situation of women and girls has improved. These changes have not happened automatically. Women individually and collectively have struggled to bring about these changes. This struggle is known as the women's movement. Individual women and women's organizations from different parts of the country are part of the movement. Many men support the women's movement as well. The diversity, passion, and efforts of those involved makes it a very vibrant movement. Different strategies have been used to spread awareness, fight discrimination and seek justice. Here are some glimpses of this struggle. Campaigning. Campaigns to fight discrimination and violence against women are an important part of the women's movement. Campaigns have also led to new laws being passed. A law was passed in 2006 to give women who face physical and mental violence within their homes, also called domestic violence, some legal protection. Similarly, efforts made by the women's movement led the Supreme Court to formulate guidelines in 1997 to protect women against sexual harassment at the workplace and within educational institutions. In the 1980s, for example, women's groups across the country spoke out against dowry deaths, cases of young brides being murdered by their in-laws or husbands greedy for more dowry. Women's groups spoke out against the failure to bring these cases to justice. They did so by coming onto the streets, approaching the courts, and by sharing information. Eventually, this became a public issue in the newspapers and society, and the dowry laws were changed to punish families who seek dowry. Satya Rani, an active member of the women's movement, sitting on the steps of the Supreme Court, surrounded by legal files gathered during the course of a long legal battle to seek justice for her daughter. एक मिनट दोस्तों, माफ कीजिएगा दोस्तों, एक कॉल आ गया था. Satya Rani, an active member of the women's movement, sitting on the steps of the Supreme Court, surrounded by legal files gathered during the course of a long legal battle to seek justice for her daughter who was murdered for dowry. तो ये देखिए दोस्तों, ये फोटो उनका सत्या रानी का सुप्रीम कोर्ट के स्टेयर्स पे बैठे हुए. बहुत ही दुखद घटना है दोस्तों. अभी हालांकि सिचुएशन में बहुत ही सही, मतलब बहुत ही अभी आजकल के सिचुएशन में बहुत ही ज़्यादा सही है. मतलब आज इतना ऐसे केसेस नहीं आते हैं अभी ज़्यादातर. यहाँ पे देखते हैं दोस्तों, ये वाला हो गया था. Eventually this became a public issue in the newspapers and society, and the dowry laws were changed to punish families who seek dowry. तो डाउरी वाला ये हो गया था. मेरे को ये वाला नहीं हो, मैं वापस से पढ़ दे रहा हूँ दोस्तों, ठीक है. मतलब मैं माफ़ी चाहूँगा इसके लिए. In the 1980s, for example, women's group across the country spoke out against dowry deaths, cases of their young brides being murdered by their in-laws or husbands greedy for more dowry. Women's groups spoke out against the failure to bring these cases to justice. They did so by coming onto the streets, approaching the courts, and by sharing information. Eventually, this became a public issue in the newspapers and society, and the dowry laws were changed to punish families who seek dowry. आप लोग दोस्तों वीडियो को फॉरवर्ड कर सकते हैं जब तक कि मैं यहाँ तक नहीं आ रहा. रेजिंग अवेयरनेस पे नहीं आ जाता. रेजिंग अवेयरनेस, एन इम्पॉर्टेंट पार्ट ऑफ द वुमेन्स मूवमेंट्स work is to raise public awareness on women's rights issues. Their message has been spread through street plays, songs, and public meetings. Protesting, the women's movement raises its voice when violations against women take place, or, for example, when a law or policy acts against their interests. Public rallies and demonstrations are a very powerful way of drawing attention to injustices. Showing solidarity. The women's movement is also about showing solidarity with other women and causes. Below. On 8th March, International Women's Day, women all over the world come together to celebrate and renew their struggles. Above, ये क्या है दोस्तों? Women are holding up candles to demonstrate the solidarity between the people of India and Pakistan. Every year on 14th August, several thousand people gathered at Wagah on the border of India and Pakistan and hold a cultural program. इसी के साथ दोस्तों आपको चैप्टर खत्म हो गया. ग्लॉसरी इसका पढ़ लेते हैं क्या है. Stereotype, when we believe that people belonging to particular groups based on religion, wealth, or language are bound to have certain fixed characteristics or can only do a certain type of work, we create a stereotype. For example, in this chapter, we saw how boys and girls are made to take certain subjects not because he or she has an aptitude for it, but because they are either boys or girls. Stereotypes prevent us from looking at people as unique individuals. Discrimination. When we do not treat people equally or with respect, we are indulging in discrimination. It happens When people or organizations act on their prejudices, discrimination usually takes place when we treat someone differently or make a distinction. Violation: when someone forcefully breaks the law or a rule or openly shows disrespect, we can say that he or she has committed a violation. Sexual harassment: this refers to physical or verbal behavior that is of a sexual nature and against the wishes of a woman. तो ये सब हो गया दोस्तों, आप लोग का बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया अंत तक बने रहने के लिए। आप लोग एक तरीके से समझिए, आप लोग के दिमाग में एनसीईआरटी धीरे धीरे छपते जा रही है। आप लोग अगर इन्हीं वीडियो को 4-5 बार देख लेंगे, 5-6 बार देख लेंगे तो आपको मजा आ जाएगा, आपके दिमाग पे एनसीईआरटी छप सी जाएगी और आपको क्वेश्चन आंसर याद करने में बिल्कुल भी कठिनाई नहीं होगी और आपको मज़ा आने लगेगा क्वेश्चन आंसर याद करने में। तब फिर तो ठीक है दोस्तों, पढ़ते रहें, लिखते रहें और मज़े करते रहें, मस्ती भी करते रहें, सब कुछ मिला जुला के एकदम बैलेंस वे में चलते रहें। और आपको अगर मेरे एफर्ट्स पसंद आ रहे हैं कि मैं आपका रीडिंग का झमेला आसान कर दे रहा हूँ तो आप मुझे मतलब मेरे चैनल को, दरअसल आपका ही चैनल है, आप ही लोग देख रहे हैं, तो मैं तो बस एक कार्य करता हूँ इस चैनल का। तो आप लोग चैनल को सब्सक्राइब, लाइक और शेयर ज़रूर करें दोस्तों, और वीडियो को लाइक कर दें। थैंक यू, और मेरे बेस्ट विशेस हमेशा आपके साथ है दोस्तों। मिलते हैं नेक्स्ट वीडियो में। हैव अ नाइस डे।